Let me give you some background information first. I was 22 years old then. I played soccer in high school, stayed active, and wasn't usually easily disturbed unless it involved guns, gangs, or anything of that serious sort. It was last summer, late, when I and 3 of my friends, 2 girls and the other guy, were bored out of our minds. We just sat around my friend's apartment in Cedar Hill all day, getting high and doing nothing. We finally decided we ought to do something else. That's when I remembered this spot I'd heard about, out past the edge of Millersburg, where the Willow River meets a small creek. There's that old hiking path over there that winds its way up into the hills and terminates at this little pond at the top. It looked like the perfect spontaneous excursion. So we got into my friend's vehicle and pulled into a roadside gas station to grab smokes, snacks, and some beverages to hold us over on the hike. The whole trip there was uneventful, no odd vibrations, just music playing and everyone laughing as usual. But looking back, I wish I would have paid more attention to the little signs something was wrong from the start. When we finally pulled over near the trailhead, I noticed that there were 2 women hiking towards the entrance. They both looked incredibly nervous, almost like they were scared of something. But since we were still pretty high, we did not think much of it at the time. I pulled out a cigarette, and one of the girls in our group asked for one. As I handed it to her, I couldn't help but glance over at one of those women. She had the longest, filthiest fingernails I'd ever seen. There was something about it that didn't seem right, but again I shrugged it off, thinking that they were maybe drifters or hippies who frequented the area. So we headed off on the trail, and all was well initially. We were joking around, inhaling the air, and simply glad to be outside after being cooped up all day. 15 minutes or so before we reached the pond, though, we came across something that immediately changed the mood. Down along the edge of the path, perhaps 60 or 70 feet distant, there were 3 men bunched together, all of them staring down into a hole in the ground. Even from where we stood, you could tell it was a hole, though you couldn't tell how deep. They didn't move or say anything, but they definitely knew we were there. We were being noisy enough. It was creepy as hell, but nobody wanted to make a scene, so we just kept walking, trying to shake off the feeling. By the time we got up to the pond, we decided we'd stay there for a bit, smoke a cigarette, pass a blunt around to relax. My friend Ryan, who was on the soccer team with me and was usually just as fearless, had wandered off some distance along the pond's bank. He liked to look around for whatever, old fishing trash, cool rocks, etc. But what he found this time was much more than that. He spotted a hatchet, a clean one, 2 clean actually. It was half buried in the muddy bank, only the handle showing. And a few feet away from it, an empty can of acetone and a large Ziploc bag filled to the top with blood. Real blood. Ryan, who was never startled by anything, just returned and sat down quietly with this blank look on his face. Didn't say anything initially. We all figured he was acting weird, but it wasn't until after we finished smoking that he motioned for us to come over and showed us what he had found. The girls freaked out immediately. One of them, Jessica, literally vomited on the spot. I knew this was serious, so I tore off my shirt and used that to pick up the hatchet, wondering if this was connected to something evil, maybe even a murder. I didn't want my fingerprints near it, but the thing was clean, not a spot on it. I figured that's what the acetone was for, to scrub it clean. Then I noticed something even more disturbing. On the blood bag, someone had marked number 19 in a black Sharpie marker. That's when I felt that intense gut-level dread that something was horribly wrong. I told them we needed to leave, immediately. As we started heading back down the trail, my eyes were scanning all around us, and that's when I spotted one of those same 3 men from earlier. He was coming out of the brush, just a few feet off the trail. He was panicked, sweating heavily, and I knew right away it was the same guy. He was wearing the same old green jacket. The other 2 men? Nowhere to be seen. Trying to play it cool, I nodded to him and said something about how we were just out here for a hike and a smoke. He stared at me for a bit, then informed me he was out here looking for his car keys that he had supposedly lost while being out on a hike the night before, but I knew he was not telling the truth. There was something in the way he was staring at Jessica, the girl who got sick, like he was sizing her up or something. He even went so far as to ask her if she was okay and if there was anything he could do. That's when my friend Ryan stepped in and told him to leave her alone. The man just stood there for a second, looking us over like he was weighing whether we'd be a soft target. Then he nodded and backed away, faking, looking at the ground like he was searching for his keys. I wasn't buying it though. I knew he was still taking sidelong glances at us out of the corner of his eye as we moved away. By that time, we were not wasting any more time. We quickened our pace, nearly speed walking back to the start of the trail. But when we were perhaps 20 feet away from the parking lot, my heart dropped. There, sitting beside our car, were the other two men. They were leaning against the doors and peering inside, as if they were trying to find a way in. I told the girls to wait near a bench while Ryan and I walked towards them. As we got closer, both of the guys turned around, facing us. And I swear until today, they had the most evil, coldest glares I have ever seen. The small one came forward with this nauseating smile on his face and said something so obscene it made my blood boil. He asked if my friend would like to watch them perform unimaginable things to our two girlfriends. I did not waste a moment. Before he could get his question out, I swung and punched as hard as I could right in his jaw. He wasn't even talking to me, but I just knew, in my gut, that if I didn't do something right then, something terrible was going to happen. The other guy, who was still leaning against the car, started to reach into his pocket, and Ryan acted fast. He kicked the guy's legs out from under him and slammed him hard to the ground, and then the girls screamed. I spun around and discovered that the man in the green jacket, the man from the trail, was now just 6 feet away from the bench where the girls had been waiting. They panicked and ran to the car, unlocking it and jumping in just in time. Meanwhile, the small guy I had punched was still dazed on the ground, and the big guy was getting completely annihilated by Ryan, who didn't hold back. Then I got attacked by the guy in the green jacket. He punched and swung at me, caught me off guard for a second, but I tackled him and just started pounding away on him with everything I had. Ryan sprinted across and delivered a nasty kick to the guy's face, with such force that his head snapped to one side and his eyes rolled back. I'm serious. I think Ryan broke something in that guy's face right then. We didn't stick around to find out. We jumped into the car, hearts racing, and sped away from there. The drive home was totally silent. No one uttered a single word. It was like we were all trying to grasp what very nearly happened. 3 days later, I got a call from Jessica, sobbing. She had just found out that 2 kids from a nearby elementary school had vanished, the same day we were up at that trail. The kids lived only a few miles from where all this took place. None of us have ever spoken publicly about what happened that day. We all figured that if we told the police, there was a chance that somehow it would be twisted and turned around on us. I don't know to this day whether what we ran into was a brush with evil or a prevention of something worse from happening. But to this day, thinking about it gives me the creeps. If I hadn't started that first fight, if Ryan hadn't thought fast, I don't know what would have happened to us or to those girls. And that alone still keeps me up on some nights. My boyfriend and I were sitting around our apartment in Boulder, Colorado, a few months ago, restless and bored. For no reason in particular, we thought it would be a good idea to go on a hike. We weren't the outdoorsy couple, and we didn't hike regularly, but it seemed like a great way to get some fresh air. Even though there was only about an hour of daylight left, we figured that would be enough time to go on a mini adventure before it got too dark. We quickly grabbed our water bottles, filled them up in the kitchen sink, and put on the best walking shoes available. Nothing fancy, old gym shoes that we used for gym class. Without waiting any longer, we departed from the house and went up into the Rockies. There are numerous hiking trails in the Boulder area, and the farther you go into the mountains, the more you have to pick from. Usually, on the occasional times we went hiking, we stuck to the lower trails where families and dog walkers stayed. But this time, we wanted to mix it up. I remembered a trail my coworker, Jake, had told me about once, a little more secluded, a bit higher up the mountain road, so we decided we'd do that one. We kept glancing at the clock, making sure we had enough time. The plan was simple: walk a little, take in some mountain air, and be back before dark. When we got to the trailhead, I noticed right away there were no other cars parked along the road. It was empty. That did give me a pause for a second, but I brushed it off, figuring it was because of the lateness of the hour. We had a good 45 minutes before sunset, so we pressed on. The trail started out with a steep decline, so we had to walk down a steep hill right away. At the bottom, we had to walk up an equally steep hill to regain the ground we'd just lost. It was a bad start, but after we got past that, the trail leveled out and became much smoother. As we walked, we spotted one coyote in the distance and two rabbits hopping together near the bushes. I joked that those rabbits better watch out with that coyote around, and my boyfriend playfully shoved me for being silly. We laughed, and for a second, it was just another still night outdoors. Barely a mile along the trail, we came across a huge fallen tree that stretched across an old, dried riverbed, like a natural bridge. It looked like a nice spot to break. We climbed up onto it, took a few photos, and just sat there in the quiet for a while, perhaps 10 minutes. The wind was refreshing on our skin, and the forest surrounding us appeared hushed and silent. However, as we continued walking, the mood was somewhat different. Not long after we got back onto the trail, my boyfriend suddenly halted. He said he heard a noise, like rustling, coming from the trees behind us. At first, I thought it was some other animal maybe, but the noise was louder, like something bigger. We both just stood still for a moment, listening. The woods felt somewhat colder then, a little more subdued. Trying to shake off the unease, we kept going, but not much longer before I said I didn't feel comfortable with it anymore. The sun was dipping low, and the light had taken on that soft, bluish tone of early evening. He agreed without argument, and we made our way back toward the car. When we returned to the fallen tree, my boyfriend's shoe came untied. He sat down on the trunk to tie his shoelaces, and that's when, for the first time during the hike, he looked back down the trail, and that's when things started to feel really wrong. Far behind us, he spotted someone, dressed all in black, hood pulled up over their head. The figure was walking slowly, steadily, and at first glance, there was nothing in it that screamed danger. People do walk around in black all the time, especially if it's chilly outside, and yet still, it struck an alarm bell in his head. He mentioned it to me in a low voice, and I was immediately wide awake, senses on high alert. It was twilight now, and the woods were starting to get dark very quickly. We decided to continue, picking up our pace. The trail curved and wound through a thicker group of trees, and we lost sight of the person briefly. I tried to comfort myself, thinking maybe that they were just another late hiker heading back as well. But when we hit the final turn, I glanced behind us, and there he was again, this time much closer. What had been 100 feet away before was now nearer 50, and the frightening part was, we had actually gained speed. He was gaining on us. Without a word, we both seemed to come to the same conclusion at the same time. Our walk turned into a run. We rounded the next bend, hearts pounding. I could feel the cold, crisp air burning my lungs as we worked harder. We were coming to the beginning of the trail now, just had to get through the hills again. At the base of the final incline, we paused for only a second to catch our breaths. That's when my boyfriend turned and looked again. The man in black had also stopped, as if he was attempting to pretend he was just walking. But the fact that he had stopped, mid-step, indicated he'd been running before until he saw us turning to look. My boyfriend didn't hesitate. He shouted for me to go, and we both ran. The slope was steep and hazardous, roots and rocks everywhere, and what little light was left struggled to filter through the dense trees above. Every step was a potential for tripping and falling. Our feet fell awkwardly on loose stones and tangled branches, but miraculously we stayed upright. We did not glance behind. All we could think of was getting to the car. At the bottom of the hill, our legs already felt as though they were going to collapse, but we compelled ourselves to push up the last incline. Every muscle screamed, every breath seared, but finally we were back at the trailhead and our car. I slammed the car door shut and started the engine with shaking hands, my heart still racing from adrenaline. As I reversed onto the road, headlights lighting up trees in bursts, the man appeared at the opening of the trail. He was breathing heavily, and as he was closer, we could make him out better now. His hood had fallen off, and his face was pale, with eyes that appeared empty, as if there was nothing living in them. A lantern, suspended from a post at the top of the trail, cast a dim light over him, just enough to make out that he was clutching something in one of his hands. I couldn't make out what it was, and I wasn't keen on lingering to find out anything else. I threw it into gear and gassed it, the tires spraying dirt as we tore down the empty mountain highway. It wasn't until we were safely away that I dared finally breathe, but even so, the image of that pale face stayed etched in my mind for a long, long time. "9 weeks ago, or so, my boyfriend Marcus and I had just brought home a new dog, a 7-month-old German Shepherd that we brought home to keep our 4-year-old golden retriever, Bella, from getting bored. One Saturday, we thought it would be a good idea to take both of them out for a hike in the country. We are situated near a city in East England called Norwich, and decided to venture out into the countryside north of River Yar, where ultimately the countryside spreads out to the sea. We drove for about an hour or so until we reached a small village near an old disused Cold War radar station, something Marcus had always wanted to take a look at from afar. It was quiet there, not too many folk around, which was perfect for giving the dogs an opportunity to run their legs out. We stopped by a track of dirt and decided to follow a rough grass path which paralleled a rolling ridge down to a group of trees on the edge of a nature reserve. As we made our way over the grass bank, I noticed Marcus slow nearly to a stop and gesture to the left. It was then that I saw them, 2 young men climbing the hill from the woods, at an angle that seemed as if they were trying to intercept us. At first, I assumed that they might be hikers or youths hanging out around the radar station. They were wearing camouflaged cargo pants and had dirty, dusty-looking clothes, so I did briefly wonder if they belonged to some kind of military reenactment team. The thought passed quickly, however, as they just kept coming directly toward us. They stopped about 10 feet away from us. One of them spoke, and the way that he did makes me uncomfortable to this day when I think about it. He had a gruff, curt manner, as if politeness wasn't necessary, and his language wasn't particularly required to make much sense. He inquired about where we intended to head, and we said we really hadn't known, just aimless wandering and follow the roads to see where they took us. He scowled at that, as if he had been expecting something else, and then suggested we take a road that he said ran through the woods to a nice spot with benches where we could sit and enjoy the view. While he was talking, I saw the other man not even looking at us. His eyes were locked on our dogs, watching them without wavering. It unnerved me, the manner in which he trailed every move Bella and the shepherd made, as if he needed to know that he had a good sense of them at all times. We didn't know the ground and hadn't met any other dog walkers that morning, so when they nodded down a narrow opening in the trees, we figured we would follow their example and went in that direction. As we walked into the woods, the trees grew thicker and cast shadows that swallowed up a good third of the light. I glanced back and could see the 2 men still standing there, not stirring, but just looking at us as we disappeared among the trees. The path itself, too, seemed strange. It was the only clear path through the woods, as if it had been carved out on purpose. That in itself should have made me more cautious, but we went on. At about 2 minutes in, Bella, our golden retriever, strayed over towards a bramble bush, nose in the ground. We didn't mind at first. Both dogs loved sniffing when we were letting them out. But then she started pawing at the same spot and rolling over in the dirt like she'd discovered something enormously interesting. Curious, Marcus and I went over to her, And that was when we saw what she'd discovered. It was a torn rubber mask, the kind cut out in the shape of a pig's face, lying in the bushes. The thing was slit and had an old-looking brownish-red smear over it, but one that was still revolting. Flies crawled across it, buzzed round and round in circles as if it had been present for a while. Marcus hauled Bella swiftly away from the whatever it was. The sight of that mask made my stomach turn in a manner I could not shake. We kept on walking, though, but the path began to narrow, the bushes and trees to either side of us narrowing in until we felt like being in a tunnel. There was a turn-off far, far away, and we silently made the decision that if it went nowhere, we'd just turn around. I walked a bit in front, pulling out my phone to take a picture of the dark closing woods. I thought it would be atmospheric. But as I lifted my phone, I felt something sharp scratch against my neck, then chin and cheek. The unexpected stinging made me jump back in shock. Marcus ordered me to freeze, his voice tight, and I stood stock still as he moved towards me and carefully started removing thin lines drawn on my face. As he pulled them out, I saw that they were fishing line, each tightly stretched between the trees. And worse, hung along them were small fishing hooks, sharp and shining in what little light did penetrate the cover. My stomach dropped. Someone had hung these up on purpose, right across the only trail. It wasn't loose debris, it was a trap. It was then that the fear hit us for sure. Confused, infuriated, and upset, we wordlessly turned around and raced back down the path to where we began. The whole time, I expected to hear footsteps behind us, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart and the rustling leaves as we stumbled our way. By the time we returned to the open area, the relief was almost palpable, but I could not help but feel like being watched. We hurried to the car, put the dogs in, and closed the doors hard. Marcus held the keys between trembling fingers and turned the key in the lock, and we pulled away from the location without looking back, or at least I attempted to. As we drove off, speeding down the empty rural road, I glanced in the back mirror, and that's when I noticed it. Someone, partially hidden by the trees at the trailhead, barely more than a shadow on the road. I couldn't make out who, but I knew someone was there, watching us leave. I don't know if the people we met previously had set up those fishing lines with the hooks, but for real, it figures too much. Either way, I never want to know. And I sure as hell never want to see them again.